Welcome to the Past Life Regression radio show and Spirituality for Souls. I'm Jonathan Yorks, your host, over the next 2 hours of this live call-in internet radio show based on the work I do in my private practice as a past life regression and life between lives regression therapist and spiritual counselor. We are streaming live here every Wednesday at the Go Network at GoNet.com. That's GEAUX. net.com, which is actually going live tomorrow at gonet.com. Check them out. Wonderful programs here at the GoNet. You can catch us on Facebook Live as well. Just for future reference, you can always go to my website at jonathanyorks.com or mysoulmyself.com, and you'll come to the opening page. Just scroll to the bottom. You'll see the links at the bottom of the page. Link on, and you will tune in. If you also like, you can listen to the show on your phone just by dialing 641-552-8117. 641-552-8117, and you can actually listen on your phone and take us on the go. I just like saying that. Okay, the number here, the call-in number is 857-366-5444. You can always message me on Facebook with the questions you have, or if you want, text me at 617-875-6686, and I'll see the text and the Facebook messages in between breaks, and I'll answer your questions as best I can. Now, before we begin the first segment, which always is about a bit of a recap of last week's show, as well as unfinished business. And like I say, when I give recap, I'm not just going through what I talked about in the last show. I'm going to give some new insights along the way. Things that I noticed that when I listened to it again, I said, I think I could be clearer here, or I just want to emphasize a certain point. So before we get into that, we always want to introduce the purpose of this program. You know, again, I get it that people are always wondering, what's he's doing this show for? And just so we're clear, this show, the purpose of it is to help you see your life through your spiritual eyes and think through your spiritual mind as a soul, to be able to process your life through your spiritual mind, to be able to see the life around you and understand what is taking place so you can make better choice. Because that's what you're here to do. You're here to grow through the conditions that you've chosen and the challenge that they create, to learn the lessons that you are seeking to learn in the choices that you are going to make. And as we all know, choice is an activator of creation. Once you make a choice, you ripple into the field of space-time energy and starts forming the future. But it's not so much the choice you make as much as well the radiance in which you make that choice. Are you making it from the best of your being or from the most harshest places within your being? So this show is meant to help you see your life through that perspective, for certainly we are biased here. The bias is that we are souls living our human lifetimes, and we are incarnating through lifetimes, and we are presently in the life we are in. And throughout this life we are in, we are here to serve purpose and meaning and fulfill the end intention of the life you are in through the one you are being. Because the one you are being at one point in this experience will no longer exist. The body itself, the vehicle you are in, will certainly die. And when it does, you will continue on. For in this show, in the perspectives we have here and what I seek to understand through the lens I see it through, you are not just a soul being human, you are the mind of the machine in which you are in. And so everything we do is based on that viewpoint. So when we come to this show every week at the Go Network on Wednesdays from 7 to 9 p.m., it's like coming to the spiritual spa. You know, dipping into the pool with me, into the state of consciousness and thoughts and realizations, to breathe in and feel within you, to awaken, which has been suppressed throughout the week because you've had tasks to do and jobs to do and perhaps children to raise or bills to pay or just everything around you acting as a distraction. And for some who engage practices to remind themselves of their essence, of their presence as souls in their human lives, bravo to you. And we're going to talk much more in a future program about how you can do a daily experience to bring yourself into the mind state, of course, the realization that what we do and what we're doing here. And so once a week at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday, or tune in anytime between 7 and 9. You come here and we can all swim together within the mindset, within the realization that we are souls being human. And the purpose of our program is to help us see ourselves through our spiritual eyes, to see the life around us through a spiritual lens, to understand that all that operates through a field of meaning and purpose, infused with the realization atmospherically that permeates like gravity through all dimensions, love. I know that sounds, again, as it does when people speak of spirituality, but the essence of what we can understand about it, the way this energy that we live within and as and through, the experience of it, the feeling that we qualify to it is the feeling of love, not justified love, not love for one and not love for another, not love because another does a condition, no, unconditional love. The realization that we are truly in this together. And thinking about, speaking of together, the most recent trends, the big movement within the country that we live in, within the world that we exist within, the big movement and how we are all involved in this theater, in this drama, in this moment. And that doesn't matter what you see as your views. We can't do it without each other. There's a bottom line that we're going to come to realize. It can't be one way or the other. We have to embrace our totality. Absolutely embrace our totality. And when we see the reflections of our nature, we can then make choice, collective choice. And we're in a time right now of seeing our nature in expression and what it would look like as a dominant viewpoint. The nature, is it our spiritual nature? No, it's our human nature in expression. And how do we know that? And this is now segueing into really last week's topics, because last week was a no agenda week. In a no agenda week, the communication, the questions, basically I had questions that people sent to me that I answered questions. And the first question was differentiating, what is the spiritual ego and what is the human ego? What we witness around us now are the dynamics of a human ego in expression. Why do I know this? How do I know this? Because the human ego operates through separatism, through divisionism, through power and control, dominate and submit, through divide and conquer. It is an operational system that generates the fear experience. So the survival psyche will then be kicked into gear and discredits anything else outside of the experience of that. But then it's something we need to see within ourselves. We need to see the human nature of all of us in the expression of it all. Not to denigrate it, not to devalue it. Man, if you bring angry into the moment right now, then you are bringing you are contributing to the energies that in which anger you. No, don't bring anger. Bring knowledge. Bring realization. Bring knowing that everything is a partnership to our expression, to our experience. Just because we're caught in a moment of time, in the moment of the theater. Hey, man, I'll tell you, the one thing, and I know I'm getting off in a segue, but I'm just going to offer this. This is what I like to see in protest. Not people screaming and protesting and chanting. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see people surrounding and circling silently in radiance of love, in radiance of knowing, in a radiance of realization that from my projection, I pull from you either the most positive aspects of your being or the most negative aspects of your being. Again, oneness, energy, radiance, we've talked about it in prior programs. But as far as the spiritual ego versus human ego, last week I went into defining it and trying to help you see the distinction between the two. And I have a client of mine who tends to the philosophy of non-duality, which is a philosophy I absolutely attend to. This philosophy of non-duality. But in the philosophy of non-duality, what upsets her most is that I use the term ego. She'd prefer I use the term awareness. And what I look forward to is a program, and I'm thinking maybe next program or sometime coming up, a program of non-duality. I want to hear the nature of the people who are non-duality thinkers, who follow the teachers of non-duality. I certainly want to hear from that, and I want to understand it more clearly because I attend to it. I absolutely do. I get the oneness, and I get the design of a recognition that within oneness, there's kind of this recognition that there is no true self. There is no ego. Because if you say ego, then you identify some experience of selfhood. And in doing that, you are now qualifying life in its totality as having such a state. When really it's not a self. It's like it's a movement of awareness, I guess, in that sense. But we'll talk much more deeply, because my argument is, then what is being the awareness? What is the awareness? And what is it aware of? There are so many questions in relation to that type of discussion. But when I use spiritual ego versus human ego, I base it on the work and the understanding we've gained in the work of Life Between Lies, Regression, and the work of Dr. Michael Newton, and my experience of working with clients in the afterlife through afterlife memories. And, the idea is that we are these individuated frequency fields within the all of life, that we are the totality and the individuated experience of its totality within our uniqueness, and what we call souls. And I call souls more as a descriptor for what we are within a dimension of our self-experience, because to me, we are beings of life. And because we are beings of life, we express through dimensions of life. And I do see these dimensions as having self-expression. And so in that self-expression, as souls that we seemingly, or the beings, the term we are using, as these individuated forms of energetic beings, that our matrix, the energetic matrix that generates our existence, the individuated frequency of our uniqueness, is also a filter. Because we are not unique just in the energy of life, we are also a depiction, a portrayal of its consciousness within our spiritual character. So when I say ego, a spiritual ego is more of an individuated realization, a recognition that I am a filtered experience, that there is a quality of an I am state that has a quality of self-experience. I can't negate the self-experience. I can use a number of words. I appreciate that if you have a no self, then what is the no self in relation to it? It has to be a self. You can't have one, in my view, my understanding of wholeness, one without another. And so in that way, the spiritual ego is your unique spiritual character that you have been evolving through lifetimes. Your human ego is your neural self, the life persona, the brain in which you are operating through, that has its conditions. And I talked last week about the temperament of these conditions, that the brain has a temperament, high reactive, low reactive. High reactive is related to extroversion, low reactive to the character type of introversion. And everything that qualifies how it is that it absorbs experience around it, and it neurologically, as I tap my head, neurologically wires itself to a time when we were too young to censor information coming in, when the brain wasn't functional enough for us to be cognitively intact, to know what was coming at us. All we did was get neurologically wired with our conditions. I describe these conditions as likes and hates, fears and faiths. Fears and faiths, loves and hates. I guess I'm forgetting my last one, but likes and dislikes. Check last week's show. I was much more eloquent with it. But that's what constitutes our conditions. And because we have these conditions, they do challenge us, of course. Because I talked about dissonance last week. And I said we can't move into resonance unless we experience dissonance. See, it is a part of a holism that we operate through, the kind of non-dual nature. So I have to be able to identify disharmony in order to move into harmony. Because if not, then I am purely in a state of harmony, and I'm almost, you could say, unconscious. I'm unconscious of myself if I don't experience anything other than myself. So what happens? I do experience otherness in a sense where I experience alternative wave patterns around me in relation to me. The you-ness, the individual uniqueness of you. And so in that individual uniqueness, we are all sharing in radiance, and our radiances are affecting each other. And in doing that, I will experience alterations within the frequency field of my being. I will feel patterns that we would call experience of dissonance, a vibration that is alter or counter to my nature. And then I will feel patterns that are much more harmonious. But how else can I evolve? How else can I grow? I mean, in that sense, when I come into these human lifetimes, I'm obtaining conditions, positive and what we call negative attributes as well, to grow through. For we are growing through the realization of a fullness, not just in a resonant fullness, but also we must know dissonance too. And by doing that, dissonance is not a negative in the experience. As a soul, dissonance is understood. It is a guide. And I describe the neural self as just that. It is not an oppositional part of our experience. It is not the negativistic and defense mechanism type of being that it is, this neural beast we call the brain. And I described that last week, and I talked about it in a prior program around the spirituality of the soul. We get it. But I said much last week, but it is a guide. And when you know how it communicates, when you understand the language, then you know how to drive the vehicle. Then you can understand the world around you and how to operate in the experience of what we call the human ego. And I said you'll know it through the experience of negativism, because it's a negativistic beast. I can't, it won't, they never will. And through defense mechanisms. Denial, doubt, minimization, diminishment of self or other, all the way up to emotional rationalization. And I describe these things pretty much so over the last number of programs. But we can experience our human ego as a dissonant experience, as an oppositional force that keeps us, that is counter to what we want to seek, what we want to get to. But it is not meant that way. So you need to recontextualize what it is. You need to realize there's a 7-second delay between the neural collapse of a thought or choice and your awareness of it. You are the chooser of what you do with thought. You're the chooser of the initial reactive moment of where you go from there. That is yours. That is you, the soul. That is your presence. In making these choices, you affect outcome. And the outcome, whether or not learned in the lifetimes you are in or you learn after the lifetimes, will be attributed to other lifetimes as strengths or as conditions that challenge. All good in that way, but nothing is dissonant to our nature and being. And then there was a question certainly about the amount of human, how much ego do we need? And listen to it, because truly it's not about amount of ego, it's understanding the human ego. Understanding this aspect that you are filtered through. And when you can distinguish you from the neural self, then you can see its guidance. Because I mentioned last week, it cannot defend anything that it cannot do. So in other words, that you cannot do. So if you're finding a defensiveness, in that moment, that is a realization that, if I'm hearing the negative context, the negative thought, the negative feeling, the negative feeling, I must have it within me to do this. Or I couldn't have this feeling. I couldn't have this negative response. The ego would not be defending itself from either imagined or real pain or perceived pain ahead. And we're talking existential stuff, as I mention all the time. This is existential stuff, meaning stuff, purpose stuff. This isn't like I talked about, like my aversion to the cold. I have an aversion. It's likely karmically in there, but it's not about my life lesson, this aversion. It's the existential stuff. And that's when we realize through this neural condition of self, through the neural self, where it's guiding us. And I work with my clients a lot on understanding this, on redeveloping this relationship. Because I talked about it. The emotional you, it's a little child. It's barely 6 years old because that's when it got wired. Then the cognitive you kicked into gear and created sophisticated mental constructs to deal with likes and dislikes. There you go, fears and faiths and loves and hates. In that way, you are a sophisticated machine that you operate through. But if you don't know how it communicates, if you can't distinguish you from the vehicle and the conditions in which you operate through, and see it as guidance, it will be dissonant. And you will find yourself in pain. And you will continue in the psychological distress that generates maladies of psychological conditions that you go see a therapist and say, hey, take care of me. Will you help me get over this psychological issue I am having? To me, all dissonance is truly about the expression of authentic being, yet through various forms and uniquely expressed in whatever way it is within your character to come through in this life as a challenge, as a dissonance. But even so, know that your relationship to this dissonance must alter first before you can remove or alter or heal or resolve this dissonance within you. Your relationship, you change first. And then the energies and all that around you changes as well as the mind within. When you recontextualize yourself in relation to the world around you and you see through a lens, a spiritual lens in this way, things are purposeful, meaningful, no opposition, nothing but participation, everything else that we have expressed in this program up to this point, well, then now you give yourself the opportunity to truly grow and to help the others grow with you. Because like I said last week, you must be authentic to who you are and act in genuine accordance with what you know in the moment of what you know. Even if the choice you're making you believe is what you know, if your choice creates or generates a feeling of dissonance in another, not because you intend to do harm, and if you're making choice to intend to do harm, that's a whole different karmic pattern and mindset you exist within. But if you don't, if you are genuine, if you are authentic, if you are seeking fulfillment, you need to change some experience within you, around you, to fulfill your life, you can't do harm. I can only help the other get to fulfillment by being authentic about the fulfillment journey I am on. And if it includes each other, wonderful. If it doesn't, namaste, man. You know, I see you as a divine being that you are on the divine journey that you are on. In the divine moment we're in that we share in order to help each other grow. And even though we may not like the feelings we share, I value the moment and the meaning that we share as we help each other become more than we can be in the life that we seek to fulfill. Namaste. Okay, let's move on to the next. Now, there was much more I was going to mention about last show. Let me move on to the question that was, how do you know when you are awakened? How do you know that this is real? I talked about my aha moment. I talked about the very first show, knowing, intellectual knowing versus experiential knowing, and how you need both. But my knowing didn't happen overnight. My knowing happened over a series of events through years of my life that culminated in a moment of my knowing. And even now I say, as much as I know, it is a feeling. And that's the only way we can truly get to a state of full knowing. Experience is one thing, but if you can't integrate experience with knowledge and you can't complete knowing, and people say, I have the experience, I know. No, you have the experience. You may not have the knowledge, but you do have the experience. It's your interpretation, your processing of that experience based on the information in which you process through. That's what gives you the knowing state as well. Yet you need the fullness of both. But to me, bottom line, you never know when you're going to know. I guess that's the journey, isn't it? I talked about the cognitive relationship to knowing last week, about going through the I think to I believe to I know stages. And you can look it up. You can check it out from last week's show and other shows. I guess you could say you never know when you get to the moment of knowing. I wish it was something that could be predicted. It can't. But if you are a seeker in this life, then inevitably you're in a journey to know whatever it is you're seeking to understand, your aha moment. I shared mine. It's a little far out, but still, it was a sharing all the same. And let's see, what else did we mention last week? Let's see. This one thing about knowing. I just mentioned it, but I wrote something down here. I talked about that there are two types, information and then experience, but I left out the third phase of this because I'm a big fan of the number 3, and you'll find that out when you speak to me, that the number 3 seems to be a universal number of stability. It's what generates holographic existence and so many other things, and I'll talk about that some other time in the number 3, but it's not an obsession, just a recognition, seemingly, a curiosity. But the third part of information, having the cognitive awareness, experience, having the actual phenomenological information, phenomenological meaning the subjective moment of experience. See, the third part, integration, and that's what I'm talking about. You need integration. And through the field of the mind in which you are integrating through is dependent on how you will interpret the understanding of the knowledge that you have gained. And if it resonates in a vibration of higher mindedness, it will reflect in your life. If not, it will also reflect. And then you have an opportunity for your knowing to grow even further. So that was that part of the program. Let me see if there's anything else that I talked about. I did talk about how do I know what fulfills me in what way? And I do want to touch upon this before we break off in this moment. And I said this, brutal honesty. I mean, truly, what fulfills you? Honestly, if you don't think about it, if there's a thought in your mind, we're not talking fulfillment of instant gratification through the neural self, the human brain, and what it's going to give it some sort of satisfaction, gratification in the moment. No, we're talking existential here. We're talking life journey, meaning, purpose, fulfillment. And I say it this way, brutal honesty. But what? How? Well, I mentioned, notice the resistance. If you have a journey that you want to take, that you're on, notice the resistance of the choice that has to be made to get there. That resistance is your guide. Granted, you won't know if you're making the right choice. You will feel as if you are. You will perhaps feel kind of a moment of harmony, a recognition that by stepping on that path of that choice, that you enter into the life worth living. And there's no other life worth living other than that life of fulfillment. So as you step onto that path of knowing, a brutal honesty, identifying what is my resistance to this? Do I think I'm going to hurt others? Am I afraid that I can't fulfill it? Am I concerned of my own character and nature that really I'm just deluding myself into really where I want to go? Well, I tell you this, if it's within your nature to fulfill it, then you can. And one day, when I talk about the 10-minute mindset program and things as such, something I developed in the way to cognitively and to neurologically alter the brain for a positive experience of self, and we'll talk about that at some point, I looked at the high achievers of the world, and I looked at their 3 core mindsets. We'll talk about that one day. It's very helpful in understanding how people of high achievement obtain the success in their life, because we all want to get there. We all want to feel, for the word success or fulfilled, whatever that journey is. But notice the resistance. Within that resistance is your guidance. All right. Let's see. I mentioned the dissonance. Oh, there was a question about soul division. Like, how can I be in the spiritual dimension, Johnny, and still be in the human dimension? How does that work? And I spoke of that, like, imagine souls as being holographic. In other words, it takes an aspect of itself. It can place itself in another experience, still be kind of tuned into it, but have its mind focused elsewhere, while that aspect of itself, that part of itself, is off having experience. And I gave this analogy, although it's not perfect. I said, kind of like, how can I be in 2 places at once type of thing? And I give the analogy of dreaming. When you're dreaming, you're in bed and you're sleeping. But where are you in your mind? You're in the dream, not knowing you're in the bed. Now, the coolest thing is when you wake up in your dream, knowing you're dreaming and you're still in the bed. We'll talk about lucid dreaming one day and dream interpretation and what dreams symbolize through the spiritual lens of the soul. So I spoke of that as far as soul division, that you have to conceptualize this not as this kind of, I took a piece and now that piece is absent. No, I took an aspect that contains the whole within me, a percentage of my wholeness, and brought it into an experience where it will focus itself. And then when I leave that experience, I will reintegrate back into my wholeness. I will move back into the fullness that I am. And there was also a question about how we do parallel lives. In the same way, you can actually take percentages of your holographic spiritual entity known as a soul, and you can place it within a few lifetimes, parallel lifetimes. Maybe we'll do a show about parallel lives, because there's some really cool stories about parallel lives I think you'd be really interested in. And the last part of this question and answer period, and I realize we've talked quite a bit of this, but I did want to reinforce with some of the things. Someone asked me, fear. How can I move beyond the fear to get to my success? I was pretty blatant with it. I said, you know what? You got to know that the fear is false. It's a false energy activated reactively. And then what you have to do is be wiser than the fear. Again, recontextualize it. Don't see it as oppositional. See it as participatory. Doesn't mean you're gonna alter the feeling. But what you can do, and I didn't bring this into it, is you can work with somebody to deepen this relationship to this fear, to identify it, to expose it, to hear what it is saying to you, its communication in relation to the self-experience that you are in. For once you, I'll say, expose the falsity in the condition of that fear, you alter the framing of it within you, feeling-wise, not just thinking-wise. And when you alter that feeling, well, then the fear becomes a whole nother experience. It's much lessened, much more lessened within you. It was within me, but I'll tell you one thing, like I talked about when I did this program, my first day, it was feeling it, man. I was feeling that fear. And I guess really what it comes down to, no matter how much we center and ground and place ourselves in a state of realization and recognition, feelings are going to be present. And when the feeling we have to show up and we have to be present, that can be an overwhelming feeling for one who doesn't enjoy the feeling of that. But it's been a joy to do that. It really has. And beyond that, I'll tell you, I have found a peace and a grounding. So I challenge all who are in the existential fears, the fear of moving towards your fulfillment, the fear of making this choice, not because of harm, but because of knowing, because the other has to grow as well, because they have to be freed, either the job or the relationship or whatever it may be, even the otherness of your ego, as that aspect of your being. To deepen that relationship, to recontextualize it, to not reframe it, reposition yourself in this realization, in the paradigm of what this show is all about. That you are a soul here being human. And tonight's show is about guides and guidance. We spoke a bit about the guidance today, actually, about the neural self and how that acts as a guide. But after we come back from the program, I'm going to talk about spirit guides. Now listen, I don't know it all. I'll tell you what I know. And if there's something that you know differently or that you want to add to the topic, please call in at 857-366-5444. You can text me at 617-875-6686 or message me on Facebook and let me know what it is that can contribute to the conversation of spirit guides and guidance. I'm Jonathan Yorks. This is the Past Life Regression radio show and Spirituality for Souls, where we are here every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. at thegonet.com. For those of you who may have to leave in this moment, this program is recorded. You can find it on Facebook, and I'm still working on my YouTube channel and getting on a podcast sites. And I will send out an email, and I'll let you all know on Facebook when that is available. Or you can also call me at the same number. You can text me at 617-875-6686 and feel free to set up a time to talk. I'm more than happy to do it. All initial consults are complimentary. There is no charge, of course. You can also go to my website, jonathanyorks.com or mysoulmyself.com. And when you open up, you'll see the opening page to the PLR radio promo. You can see my contact pages there. Go to the home page or the contact page, or really mostly any other page, and you'll be able to find a way to send me a contact and request a time to talk. Thank you again. I look forward to doing the next segment with you on guides and guidance. See you in 5. I guess I just can't be that disciplined. Welcome back to the Past Life Regression radio show and Spirituality for Souls. I'm Jonathan Yorks, and now we're coming into the meat portion of our program. Irony, I say meat when I don't eat meat. But we're coming into the meat portion of our program, and tonight's topic, guides and guidance. So, what do we mean by guides and guidance? We are speaking of spirit guides. That's what we are speaking of. The ones who are with us through lifetimes to help us move forward through the nature of our being to grow and mature and help us process and provide us with positive affirmation and their nature, their nature in relation to our character. For we are paired up with these guides. And then in this segment, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit. I have some case studies, some case examples of spirit guides and their interactions. And so I'll be reading off on these kind of interactions and then adding commentary along the way. But the realization that we are all assigned a guide. When we are birthed as souls, we don't meet our guides right away. We are met by the nursery keepers, and I talked about that in the Life Between Lives regression show. But eventually we are taken to this, what I call the place of play. And from there, it's the first time we are interacting with other entities that we call souls. And within that experience also are the guides. They are coming in. They have already been assigned to us. All the knowledge, all the knowing, the field is interactive. The knowing is instantaneous, depending on the intended of the knowing. So when we're dealing with guides and master guides and junior guides and training guides or the ones of us who are souls who are learning to be guides, and we'll talk about the first step that we take when we are learning to be guides, that it's all interactive, and all that it takes to communicate is a thought of the other. So when a guide's communicating, all it requires for you to receive their communication is to think of them. In that moment, they are in receipt of you. They know you are interactive. But we have guides that are hands-on, and we have guides that are hands-off. Our guides don't save us from ourselves. That's not their work. There's more you could say in the line of the angelic, and we'll talk about that in a future show, about the angelic, because even I am still learning and trying to bite the apple of such a viewpoint, because it does come with bias, certainly, where we think it comes from prior human traditions. But we have words for these aspects of ourselves, just like we have the word soul, just like we have the word ego to describe a quality of experience. That is all. The distinction, ego is a distinction of that awareness in relation to all of the awareness, frequencies in relation to all of the frequencies, distinct yet unified, self and unself and non-self, all in the same breath. But as a spirit guide, as we are being met by our spirit guides, we are now nurturing the beginnings of our interaction. And like I said, every spirit guide is assigned to a group. And depending on the level of maturation of a spirit guide, it's really depending on how many souls these spirit guides can work with. Because we can't think in a linear fashion. We can't see consciousness as pieces. You have to see it as holographic. All of it is holographic. Our entities are holographic. Our guides, our master guides, all holographic. And can perceive. These are souls, beings, entities that are skilled in the capacity to be through the experience of multiple self, the infinite experience, and being able to be in the oneness of every moment and the fullness of being in the individual, yet being in the knowing of the full, all in the same breath. Something we are all working towards, seemingly. Getting to that place, and our guides are helping us get there. So we meet our guides in these playground settings, and eventually we are removed from those settings and placed within a soul group with the ones that we have been interacting with that seem to be in relation to our nature, in relation to our spiritual character. Now, not all souls are the same in every soul group, but our guide is meant for us to work with us uniquely based on the type of soul that we are. And I'm going to offer you a couple of examples. And as I do that, I have to put on my glasses for those that are watching Facebook and everything. And I realize it's a reflection, but it helps me see what I wrote down. Now, just so we're clear about the idea of guides, the ones that we call guides, Dr. Newton describes them as agents of comfort, assurance, and unconditional acceptance. They build a morale and instill confidence. They know how to motivate without directing. Now, that's a skill. That's a skill. And I'm going to give an example in a little bit of how we do that, how our guides do that for us. So, here it is. They are assigned to us depending on their teaching type and spiritual temperament. Our spiritual temperament and their spiritual temperament. For our guides certainly have temperaments, so to speak. I know the word ego is a very temperamental word, but they have their own awareness, their own distinction, their own natures and characters. They are still unique expressions of life. They are still individuated life forms, yet evolved beyond the need of incarnating to exist without that means of growing, because they've incarnated, they've grown as much as they're going to grow. And so they're deepening through integration, through being able to be in the multiplicity, a non-local state, so to speak, while localized all in the same breath. And we'll talk about that again in some sort of future programs related to quantum science and the idea of non-locality, localized non-locality in that sense. So this is an example now. This is a male client, 34 years old. He was a carpenter, admittedly stubborn with a quick temper, describing his guide. I call him master teacher, this person says, because he has proven himself to be very wise and compassionate about my misgivings. He knows I can be very hard on myself, but if he instructs me in a way to do something, I'm likely to do the opposite. So he uses a very hands-off approach and waits for me to ask for help. If he comes to me without my asking, I'd reject his help because I think I can do things on my own. I'm like a stubborn child that way. So the type of guy that fits this character type of this soul, a soul that has a deep, independent streak within it, a kind of a soul of assurance, a soul that needs to see its own stumblings in order to realize its own nature, as opposed to another intervening for it, providing those insights for it. But this guide, the guide of this soul, this guide was a perfect fit, because he was very hands-off, this guide, and he waits ask for help. And in that moment, that's when he knows he is needed. So, for those of you who have stubborn streaks, who feel you need to do it all on your own, realize something, that just asking for help may not get you help, by the way. It may not work that way, because it may be woven into the intention of the lifetime you're in, that asking for help in certain parts of your life that you knew you were going to have to make choice without the help, that you were going to do it independent, that you had to see yourself stumble and fall. Know that your guide is not going to be present in the way that you want it to be present, but they are always supportive. In the very last segment of this program, I'm going to talk about how you can tune into your guide. And that will be a lot of fun in the last segment of this program, so stay tuned. In the last segment, how you tune into your guide. Okay, another example. Now this guide is different. The guide of this person's a female client, 40 years old, executive assistant in a large marketing firm, has had opportunities for advancement, and has taken the ones that fit into her role as assistant, but has rejected leadership positions because she's afraid she'll be exposed as incompetent. And this is what she says. My guide's name is Solana. She has been with me since my beginning. She is very soft and loving, but will be firm with me. I have a tendency to be passive, and she pushes me to take on some challenges. I think I'm not ready for, but I trust her wisdom and always try. When I fail, she points out how I succeeded and how my successes have added to my growth. So you have a soul whose spiritual nature is to see itself as lesser than, in whatever context it sees as them, and to be hard on itself, to focus on what it was unable to accomplish, on what was incomplete. And so what's the perfect guide for the soul? A guide that says, yes, I see that part of your equation, but let's not forget the other part of the equation. See how you have been successful and see how that has contributed to your growth. And then see when you've been unsuccessful and see how that has contributed to your growth. Now, see how it all contributes to your growth. And when we take on that fullness, the realization that we really can't do wrong, we can't do bad, we can't fail in lives. All we can do is learn either within the lifetime or in the afterlife. And we talked about that in one of the prior programs. Learn it in the life, you bring it as a positive attribute in the next lifetime, as a strength of yours. Learn it, don't learn it in that life and have to learn it in the afterlife, and you bring it back in the next life as a condition, a negative attribute that you have to work on and grow through in order to fulfill the lesson of that following life. Check out the show on the lessons of souls. We get much more deeper. We get more deeply into it. In the recognition that for this soul, she needed more of a hands-on guide. And this guide was providing a reassurance, a redirection. Because again, that soul's tendency was not to see herself in the positive light, to hold on to aspects of herself that weren't fulfilled in the journey of her life. Okay. Now, I am going to talk about something else beyond just the guides, although there is one more. I do have, and this was really cool. This was a client of mine, and this client went through a life between lives regression, and they died in the Navy in World War II. They were bombed, and this person in that life abused alcohol and women, and the lesson of that life was how pain infects me. Isn't that a great word, infect? That in that life, it wasn't how pain affects me. In that life, the lesson was how pain infects me. And so what we do when we leave our lifetimes, we are generally greeted upon return. And we'll have separate shows about that, about the idea of greeting, about the idea of orientation when we meet with our guides on the way back, when we first process the lifetimes, and how based on your maturation as a soul, that really you don't always meet your guides right away. If you're a more advanced soul, you're going to have a different kind of transition and a different knowing upon return than if you're a less advanced soul, more of what we'd call a beginner type or an early intermediate type soul. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. So now this soul is met by their guide. The soul's name is Mayal. Okay. And when he meets with this guy after crossing over, they have a discussion. And this is what the orientation discussion is like when we meet with our guides. I ask, where does Nola take you? Now, Nola was the name this person gave their guide. We go to a garden with a fountain, and we sit on a bench. Now, this is what we understand when we meet with our guides upon coming back. We all have these environments in which we meet with them. For this person, it was a garden. It was a beautiful garden with a fountain, and they described it much more fully. And with a bench, a stone bench that they sat in front of this fountain in this garden. And it was a very pleasant and peaceful, and the sounds of nature, the birds tweeting kind of feeling of this environment. I have had other souls come back and not go to such places. Souls that have just actually gone to classroom where there's a table of 4 walls, a desk in the middle, a table and 2 chairs, and they sit with their guide and they have a discussion with none of the fanfare of other necessities of influence, features of the environment around them. These souls are very serious, these souls. These souls are there to learn. They're very studious. They're very gung-ho. They're not souls who are really into play. They're into work. And so they show up again. When they come back, they're not into the fanfare of being greeted by everybody and being, parties and everything. No, they want to get back to work. And so if you find that nature in this life, that you're somebody who's, I'm just working and working and working, and that's something I do. It's something that it gives me life, gives me breath, that if I'm not working, I'm not existing. Well, it could be your spiritual character coming through. So this person goes to a garden. And I asked this, what happens next? The client says, she asks me how I feel about my last life. She knows I come back with some regret. Now, these orientation sessions that we come back to when we meet our spirit guides, these are not times to go into deep processing. I've mentioned this before in prior programs. These times when we go into orientation is more about kind of processing, deprogramming, like if you're coming back from a mission in the military and they want to debrief you. That's what this is like. Our orientation with our guides is more of a debriefing. But that's not the purpose of why I bring this one up. I ask, what is your response? I tell her I didn't do very well. I died in pain. Yeah, he was blown to bits. I ask, what's Nola's response? She asked me if I met my goal. And I asked, and what was your goal in the life of Jim? His name was Jim in that prior life. I set out to love myself, but instead hated myself and carried that pain like a flag in my life leading to my death. Funny how Jim would use flag, how this client would use flag in this life, because he had other prior lifetimes in a military fashion. And so the idea of flag was very important to him. And he finds in this life that he is very, very, his energies around flags. And the value and the relationship to his identity, it's still present in his life. So the fact that he would use flags was a wonderful thing that he said there. But he set out to experience this pain, and he understood something, that by doing this, this actually infects him and what it means. And he wore it in that lifetime. Why? In that past life, he was abused, neglected by his father, physically abused in that lifetime, left home, went to the military, found positive affirmation, positive regard because he was successful in the military. He had an aggression and a tenacity that kept him going that he brought from prior military type lifetimes. But he was an alcoholic and an abuser himself. And when he died in that life, he died in pain. And when he met with his guide in the orientation, I asked another question because I wanted to understand how the guide's a good fit. So when I asked, what was your goal in the life of Jim? And he said, I set out to love myself, but instead hated myself. I then asked him, oh, wait a minute. I then asked him, why was this guide good for him? How come this guide was a good guide for him? And Jim said this, and this client, that this guide was a good guide for him because his tendency to go into this kind of place of acting out in his aggression really left him in his lifetime with a feeling of not discomfort, but a feeling of despair within him. He couldn't feel the positive because he wasn't fulfilling positive in his life. He wasn't acting out positively. He would learn his lessons in his afterlife, but he wasn't learning them in his lifetimes. So when I asked him why this guide was so good for him, because this guide was always infusing him to see through the experience of himself positively. And every time this guy would interact with him, he would feel this experience of positivity that he did not have within himself. This guide was like a role model. And that's something we begun to understand. This was not Jim. This was not Miles' primary guide. This was a guide that was kind of like a guide in training, but a pre-guide in training. See, for Miles, Nola was a guide that he had known in prior lifetimes, and we find that actually consistent when we are obtaining new guides and guides that are helping us progress further in our maturation. We don't stay with the same guide. We have a primary guide, but then we have junior guides. I wouldn't call it a hierarchy, of course. It is more of a recognition of maturation, of the experience and the obtaining of knowledge and the integration of this knowledge into a knowing state that your understanding and the relation to what it is that you are seeking to understand has been fulfilled or is fulfilling. And thus you alter and you alter the frequency and you elevate the experience within yourself. And in that way, this guide was one of those role model guides. Not really a guide in training, like a pre-training guide. And what we do, seemingly, is that as those souls who are seeking to become guides, what they become are role models for the individual. And they don't guide them. What they do is they just exist, they express in their own nature. And in doing that, we learn through the experience of their nature about the experience an experience of our nature, what it is that we're seeking to bring forward, that we feel it is absent in our nature. I can't know it until I can see it, until I can feel it. And in the spiritual dimension, we can feel the experience of the other in us, through us. They help us in that way. These ones who are more advanced than us know how to get to us. They know our defenses. We can't hide it from them. And in that way, we have these guides that are more role model types. And there's another example of this. This was a guide, this is a client who lived an Egyptian life. He was a male client, 60 years old. And he was a lower caste builder, a hard labor. And he was mentored by a kind-hearted engineer who raised him in rank and later helped him, and later he died successfully as a builder, higher in rank. So I asked the question, how did Rilan, the name of his guide, become your guide? The client. He was assigned to me because he's known to me. He's been a mentor in my Egyptian life. I ask, is he a new guide? He is newly assigned. I ask, how come? I am ready to progress in my specialty, to be a guide, and he has qualities I want to nurture in me. I ask, which ones? And this is the same thing. Unconditionally positive. I have a tendency to be very hard on myself, and he helps me feel another experience within myself, kind of like seeing the good in someone until you see it in yourself. And how does this happen? Think of this as energy. Again, you are in an energetic state. You're in relation to your guide. You can feel their energetic presence. And not only can you feel it, you can drink from it. You can wash in it. You can move it through you. And they can feel you in the same way. And in that experience, you now imprint within your spiritual psyche something that you feel absent within yourself. We can blend energies. We can interact and think of it as energy. Think of it as, again, a blending. So there's no intrusion. No, it's like snuggling. You know, you feel a snuggle, but the snuggle just isn't on the outside. It goes right through you, and you feel the feeling of the snuggle. And when you snuggle in this life, and you feel not just the outer sense of the snuggle, but the internal experience of the snuggle, that's what this person's communicating. They feel unconditional positivity from this particular being, something that is absent within themselves. And by finding that from another, they can start to discover it within themselves. So we start off in this journey, this idea of guides. They're assigned, they are working with us, they know us. And rather going into details about the specifics of how does one become a guide, as much as the gradations that we go through of maturation, the stages, and the first stage is being a role model. So if you are in this life, and you have an identity, a relation to being a role model, acting as if a role model, acting as if a mentor to another, there's a good chance that you are a guide in training or seeking to nurture the aspects within you that'll bring out from you the innate nature of your character as guide within the nature of your capacity, because your character will be like others, unlike others. You are unique. Every guide is unique. Every soul is unique. We are individuated uniqueness in the field of totality. And that's an awesome place to be. So in that way, we move to this idea of being role models. And as we do become guides in training. And we do have guides in training, guides in training that actually incarnate with us. And I didn't obtain stories for this particular show regarding the idea of guides in training and how they relate to us. But I can share some, at least that's off the top of my head. And I think of one guide in training. It was a lifetime that was happening somewhere in the Middle Ages. And this person was a highly pious individual in the world, in the Christian world. And as they were working, there was this one being, one person, a young woman, who touched this pious individual's soul, that turned him from someone who was religiously oppressive to someone who was one of charity, someone who gave away power in order to help those who were less in power. See, what he didn't realize, that child who passed on while the child was in his role, as a focus in his life, one he had nurtured, one he was nurturing, one he cared about, one he found sentiment for no reason other than this uniqueness, this being he was drawn to it. He couldn't explain it. And we're going to talk about how we identify each other. Again, in the last segment, we'll talk much more about that. But he identified this soul. It was in a moment. In that moment when he was moving through the township in this very pious way, kind of lording over the others around him, and he sees this child. And he notices this child sitting there just watching him. But not watching him with sadness, not watching him with fear, watching him with compassion. He felt compassion coming from this young child. Everybody else had a different feeling around him. But in this story, as my client told it in that lifetime, that child who he felt compassion from, he decided or moved to take under his wing. And this child refused his help. This child would not take his help. And as he tried to help this child, and he watched this child wither, and this child die from refusing to take his help, he decided that he would never let that happen again. That he would take whatever power, whatever means he had, and he would help all others. That was his guide, a guide in training, who came into that life to add that ingredient. And that's what guides and trainings do. We find them in our lives. They're not our primary guides. They're our helper guides, absolutely. They're not the role models. They're providing guidance through a moment of relationship. Not a moment of identifying as a model of that what we want to achieve or move to obtain, or that is absent within us that we are seeking to gain. No, this is different. There's an exchange that takes place. They take on a certain role within a lifetime in order for us to be moved in a direction that we have intended to grow through. For that client, he needed that feeling of compassion from that child in order to move into his own realization, his own awakening of what he was doing, how he was acting out, and how he felt like how he failed and how he would not fail again. It was a very interesting dynamic. And that's what we have with guides in training. Then we have our junior guides. Junior guides are part of our soul groups. They usually operate with two or three of us. They don't incarnate with us as far as junior guides. As far as not what I've come across, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please, someone from the Newton book, but I haven't looked in that part of the book at this point in a little bit of a while. And as I understand it, at least in my mind, as I think of it, we junior guides do not incarnate with us. What they are is they actually have a few of us in the actual soul group that they operate with, that they guide, that they nurture, usually similar character types. Now, soul groups can be made up of just a few or many souls, but what we've come to see is at least we're dealing with 8 to 17, 18 to 20 type souls in a soul group. 8 to 20, there you go. All unique. And as we move into specialization, we actually refine our groups and we work with less amounts of souls, not lesser souls, less amounts of souls. In my own specialty group, I only work with 3 other souls. Talk about that. If I haven't spoken of it already, we'll speak of another time. But these junior guides are just that. They actually work directly with us. Now, usually you have advanced a little further along at that point. You're beyond the beginner stage type soul. Usually beginner stage type souls work with primary guides, a singular guide. But as we start to mature, as we start to discover our nature and being, our relation to what we may feel as the otherness and that we are a relation to, and that is us and its other expression, And as we find ourselves gaining an understanding of our own nature, we are introduced to other guides. Junior guides work with us in small groups. And you may have a few junior guides working within one soul group. But as we progress, we move beyond junior guides, beyond primary guides, into specialization groups, teacher guides. And in that way, we are pretty hands-off at that point. We have advanced to a point within our maturation as souls that we kind of know what we're doing, and we're really seeking to best recognize and realize through our own choice making, but our own expression. Now, we do receive support. I receive support from my guide. I do have a specialty guide. He's called Orain. And Orain, to me, when he appeared to me when I did my first Life Between Lives regression, Life Between Lives regressions, for all of you who may not know, is memories from your afterlife. And again, they are memories from your afterlife. And we're going to talk about one day about what memories are, how we can identify with them, what they mean, how we experience with them, and how we can have a relationship with them. Because they are consciousness in a moment, and you are in relation to that experience of this phenomena of consciousness of your mind, and these stories come through your mind. And it really is about becoming familiar with how you experience this phenomena of yourself through your human filtered self, so that you can deepen that relationship when you're doing the regression work itself. So as I transitioned and I went through my initial greeting moment, there behind my initial greeting moment was my guide, and he appeared to me as this little Caucasian-looking Buddha dude, wearing a golden gown with a purple sash going across. And he wasn't very tall. I'm going to say 5 foot, 5'2", 4 foot. He was big, and he was chubby, and he was happy, and he was smiley. And he actually reminded me of a statue in my mother's home as a kid growing up. And the person didn't ask me, as they facilitated the Life Between Lives regression, how come my guide appears to me that way? And we do that because our guides will appear to us in these Life Between Lives regressions in the way that we can best identify with them. Now, some do appear more energetic. I hear many of the old man with beard type looks. I do hear a beautiful young woman type look, with a long black or blonde hair, with benevolent feelings and beautiful eyes. I hear a lot of that expression. I also hear some that are just quite funny, like my guy. I hear other guides that come in and look like a jester. In Dr. Newton's book, I think there's a story to that. Our guides appear to us in a way that we can best relate to them. And in doing that, we now open our energies to them. And we open our energies to our guides. Then they can start to work with us in a way that we are able to receive them. And receiving your guide in this lifetime, you have signals. There are things going on in this lifetime that will help you understand and feel your guide around you, be it supportive or through the kind of guidance that we work with our guides. Because our guides don't just knock on the door and say, "Hi, I am here." And I will say this, they do in some instances. I have a client, but I had a question from someone who sent it to me on my email. And they had an experience younger in their life. An experience that I think I'll share with you right now. She says, "Thank you for your webcast. I am very much enjoying it. Thank you." The question: can your spirit guide visit you while you are in a meditative state, perhaps even in dreams? I had an experience while in a very deeply relaxed state. I was not meditating per se. I saw a man who said he was a spirit guide of mine. I recorded in my journal what I had seen so that I would not forget it. He told me his name, which sounded bizarre. I wrote, his colors are purple, almost black purple, and a little gold. However, I did not record it if it was colors of his clothes or his aura. Around 2004, I read Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. By the way, that's when I read them too. I was struck by the odd-sounding spirit names and the spiritual auras. I began to think that perhaps I had seen him. Would I be able to confirm this with either a past life or Life Between Lives regression? I just want to offer, first thing, yes, you can. I have many clients who come in who have had interactions with their guides. And I guess I misspoke when I said they don't come knocking at our door. In some instances they do. In some instances in a deeply meditative state or in a deeply introspective state. We can feel their impression. We can receive the impression of their mind, or we can see the appearance of them in our room, in our moment with us. And usually it comes with some sort of acknowledgement, some sort of message. Sometimes the message is just in the appearance itself. Other times it's meant to plant a seed so that one day you can go back and identify this guide. Now, the way we do it is through life between lives regression. A past life regression, you will not see your guide. It doesn't mean we can't induce the moment. There are other such sessions as well, besides a life between lives regression, where we can create the experience, the environment in which you can have your guide come to you. Because, as I said, the one way we communicate to each other is by thought. And what that thought is, thought's like ringing a doorbell. Think of it that way. So if you're thinking very generalized thoughts, you're not ringing anybody's doorbell. But if you're thinking of your guide, if you bring that thought to your mind, it's like you're ringing the doorbell. Now, depending on what you're requesting when you think of your guide is depending on how your guide will respond. Again, do I have a hands-off type guide, which is my guide? Oraine's very hands-off. I seem to have a stubborn nature. I want to see how I stumble and fall. And I'll tell you, this stubborn streak within me has certainly required me to grow through lifetimes where I had to gain attributes so I could gain a certain quality of understanding and knowledge within my own experience of self and awaken so I could fulfill the lesson, for me, of self-acceptance before I journeyed into the next cycle of self-growth that I am on right now. But Orain doesn't appear to me. The way I feel Orain is when I have a tingling sensation in the back as I touch my right back scalp, right down by the base where closer a little up from where the neck is for all those who are listening to this program. I have a tingling sensation in the rear right quadrant of my brain. That's how I know he is talking to me. I mean, it's weird. I'll just be reflecting. And I don't feel anything. There's no feedback. But when I have, I'll get this tingling sensation. It's like when I'm tuned in. I'll get this tingling sensation in the right rear quadrant of my brain, of my head, and my scalp. And when I do, I know that Orain is there, and I listen. I listen. Is he guiding? Is he supporting? What is he providing for me in that moment? And that's how I've identified his presence for me. Now, in the life between lives regression, in mine, there was a question asked. How does Orain connect with you in the life you're in? How does he communicate to you? And I said, I identified this. It was something that had happened in my life, but I didn't know how to qualify. Didn't know what it was. I just thought it was blood rushing to my scalp in some way. I'm like, okay, hopefully I'm not getting an aneurysm. Hopefully everything is okay. But no, as I went further into my explorations, as I did my life between lives regression, I met Orain. Now, the funny thing is, when I was reading Dr. Newton's books, I thought of my guide and his name, and the name Oreo came through my mind. Like, really? Oreo? That's a funny sounding name for a guide. But as I transitioned, as I went to my life between lives regression, it wasn't Oreo. It translated as Orain in my mind. I see it as O-R-A-Y-N, Orain. And he's awesome. He appeared to me as a little Buddha dude in my mind, so I could have an identification with him, so that I could be present in the human experience of Jonathan, in the spiritual memory that I was having, in which he appeared. Now, did he appear to me that way when I crossed over from my last life? Well, he appeared to me in this moment in that way. And as he did, I had my relationship to him, and I discovered more about my relationship with him, how we connect, how he communicates, how he's there for me. Listen, he came as a Buddhist because he wanted me to identify the spiritual journey I am on, the spiritual awakening that I'm going through. This isn't because of some sort of pious nature that I am that I see taking place, and oh, look at me. No, it's not like that. It's a condition seemingly I'm seeking to obtain in this life to bring into a future life. for whatever reason, this attribute that I am learning and obtaining is going to be used. So in that way, Orain helps me identify this. And your guide does too. Your guide communicates to you. Absolutely. And I guess I can see in my pages, there's so much more I was going to talk about this. And maybe I went off on a little tangent and not giving you the full flourishing, flowering, everything about the idea of guides and guidance. You can always get Dr. Newton's books. They're wonderful. Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, about the afterlife and people's reports of the afterlife. Highly recommend it. All this information is in there. I just brought some of my own client experiences into it so that you can have a relationship. In my own experience, so you have a better understanding that what happens for me is happening for all. What happens for you is happening for all. Again, we're all extraordinarily ordinary as souls, all part of the fullness of life that we are seeking to fulfill individually, as individuated beings and as a totality in the framing of non-duality. I appreciate that framing. So, when we come back from the next break, we're going to talk about how you can begin to identify your spiritual guide communicating with you. So, we'll be taking a 5-minute break. If you have to leave, again, you can always come back and check the recording on Facebook. Again, I'm working on the YouTube channel and the podcast site to download it there. I'll be sending something out there. You can always, if you want to and you have more questions, contact me through jonathanyorks.com or mysoulmyself.com. Go to my contact page and send me off a request to contact and connect, maybe a time, and I'm more than happy to schedule with you. All contacts, initial consults are complimentary. There is no charge for such things. It's my pleasure to do so. If you are seeking now to move along, you can also contact me at 617-875-6686. That's what I wanted to say as well, so that you can also feel free to text me or call me at your total convenience. I'm Jonathan Yorks. This is the Past Life Regression Radio Show and Spirituality for Souls. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be back and we'll move into the discussion of how you can feel or identify when your guide is communicating to you. to the Spirit Guides and Guidance Show. We've been talking much over the past 45 minutes about spirit guides and their relationship to us. I've spoken more about the progression of spirit guides as well, as far as when you seek to be a spirit guide as a soul, you are moving through stages of engagement, and the first is as a role model, and then as a trainee you actually incarnate and work as a relational being to that particular soul, and as you're working into a junior guide status, you are given a few souls to work within a group, and then when you go to primary guide status, you are overseeing an entire group as well as all the other underlings, so to speak, of guides, the juniors, trainees, and role models that are also working, and with these souls that you are working with, and you are all in constant communication. When we operate through our oneness, when we operate through this kind of dimensional reality of non-space, non-time, non-locality, again, all we have to do is think a thought to ring the doorbell, and that's how it works. But before we go into that aspect, that part, how we communicate with our guides, for that's what it is about this last segment, I just want to come into, I wrote something down regarding when the first recognition of a guide-like qualities comes within our soul group. And I want to mention how the next shift begins around level 3 or 4. Now, level 3 or 4 in soul development would be considered the intermediate level stages of our maturation. And this one was assigned to oversee a younger soul, much like a babysitter. We do not guide these young souls. We act as role models. This is a role model soul. It is here we begin to define our style of being a guide. Now, this new case study was a new level 4 female, 45-year-old, works as a child psychologist, came for exploration. And I asked, now that you have advanced in your progression, what is you seek to specialize in? And I says, I'm training to be a guide. What kind of guide? One who provides assistance and oversight to younger ones. How many do you oversee? I have 4 souls I am overseeing. Now, very interesting. I mentioned role model. This one is overseeing 4 guides. So in that capacity, the relation to role model and overseeing a number of ones lets me know this is actually a junior guide, not a role model guide. When did you first know you wanted to be a guide? In my soul group, I enjoyed providing alternatives to decisions made and could see how others responded. I've been told I have a very soft nature, which makes others very receptive to me. What about your specialization are you working on? Being firmer. I have a tendency to be too gentle without holding the souls under my care responsible for their actions. I'm rather forgiving, knowing how hard it is to incarnate on earth. And so she goes on to describe how she got matched up with a very aggressive soul, and how she helps this soul see that aggression is only a limited experience, a limited possibility, and that through her nurturing ways, she is able to help this soul identify a softer approach. But through the firmness, she also helps that soul that is much more aggressive understand that approach, which speaks to that soul's character, the idea of firmness, that actually speaks to that other soul's character, that is an aspect of her that this soul will identify with. So as she grows it as a spirit guide, as she grows that aspect of herself, she'll see it in resonance and reflection as the one she is guiding is responding. If she's not firm, they're going to respond in one way. If she is, with the nature of her being as she's seeking to express, she will actually see the reflection of that soul in the difference in the exchange and the feeling she will feel coming from that soul in response to what she's doing as far as working on her nature and firmness. So there was more to it than that, and I realized as I was reading it, I just didn't want to get too involved, and I was actually much more interested in this point in talking about how is it that you can sense your guide around you. Okay. Guides communicate to us through a variety of means. Mostly it's sensorial, visions or visual imagery, sounds, smells, touches, or even a taste, something you feel over the body. Any sensorium exchange helps us see our guides. And we have many times, and when we're doing this, I had one client, she was a total bird aficionado, loved birds. But the one bird she loved the most was the hummingbird. And she very seldom saw hummingbirds in her area. She lived out in Western Mass. And she would put hummingbird feeders out, and they would come around. But there was a period of time they weren't showing up. And she wanted to know why, but she recognized this was a very distressed moment of her life. She was feeling her marriage was failing. She felt that her connection with her children was somehow dissolving. She felt lost and isolated. And she didn't know what it is what she was going to do. She did understand that she had to make a choice that was going to benefit her, but also those around her. And she was feeling very, very conflicted in this choice. So here she is, sets out these hummingbird feeders, and no hummingbirds had come around. It was the early springish, as spring was coming along. None of them were coming around. And she's sitting on her porch, and she's thinking of her problem. And she has a thought. She has a thought that in this problem she's having, how can she nurture the best of everything from everybody? The best of the experience of her relationship with her husband. How can she nurture that? How can she nurture the best of everything in her children? How can she nurture the best of herself in this moment? And as she's having this thought and wondering this in her mind, a hummingbird shows up, and it flutters about, and it spends an extra long time there. It just doesn't go and sip and fly away. It goes to all the different places, all the different openings, and it is taking in its nourishment. And it just flutters there. And when it's done, she says, it's just looking at me. It's just looking at me and fluttering. And I said, thank you, and I said goodbye, and it flew off. And she said in that moment she identified that her spirit guide was with her, communicating with her through this hummingbird. Now, the cool thing is hummingbirds is one of my things. It's one of our family patron animals, so to speak, because we got married in Costa Rica, and hummingbirds were all around us, so it became kind of our family bird. So when she told me the story, I was very much, pleased. It kind of warmed the cockles of my heart, because I get it. I get how our guides communicate to us. My guide doesn't communicate to me that way. He doesn't do it through visuals. He does it with a sense of a feeling. For me, there's a quality of peace I have. It's a moment. It happens very suddenly. When I'm pondering something, and I'm really in deep ponderance, I'm really conflicted, somehow something happens where the insight into possibility comes into my mind, and then I know, I feel a sense of peace. Like someone's patting me in the back, like, good boy, you're doing well. And in that moment, I get it. Now, I talked about how my guide, I feel him in the back of my head, and how I feel that tingling sensation. That's when I'm working intuitively in that exchange of intuition. But when I'm working on my own problems, when I'm having my own solutions, I'm seeking my solutions, I feel it as that kind of pat in the back moment. It's almost like I can feel it now in that sense. So, how can you tell yours? Well, notice. Notice in the moment of reflection. If you've already had them, great. Then identify what they were and what took place. If you haven't, begin it. Reach out to your guide. Ring that doorbell. And move into existential relational development and being. Don't ask them the lottery pick or should I take this job. It's not about that. They don't tell us what to do. They will never tell us to make a choice. Choice making is always ours, never theirs. They will guide us. They will help us with feeling. They will nurture us. They will support us. But they will not tell us what to do. They will not tell us the choice to make. That is on us. So you can never ask your guide to help you in a choice. You always reach out. You ring the doorbell for guidance or for whatever it is that you're feeling existentially in need of in that moment. And then notice what takes place. Notice, do you feel a sensation in the body? Notice, is there a feeling you feel in your skin? Notice, is there a thought in your mind that comes from out of nowhere that all of a sudden creates a ripple effect of calm within you? Notice anything visual around you taking place. Notice the sound that may be taking place around you. Notice anything sensorially or anything that is thought or feeling within you that creates an experience of alteration within you. For this woman with the hummingbird, it was that. For me, it's more internal. It's a tingling sensation, but I do get that pat in the back feeling. And I have a law of 3, like I said earlier. So when you do this, it has to, for me, occur 3 times. 3 times, that's the way it works. The first time, okay, I think it's taking so, think it's happening. Second time, all right, I'm starting to believe. Third time, I know it. I know it. Because they repeat themselves and they demonstrate themselves, and you will feel the difference within you. Now, for some, you may even see your guide in your mind. For some, create the environment. Create the natural environment or whatever environment that you want to conjure so that you can call your guide in for an exchange. Notice who shows up. Notice the image. Notice the feeling in the exchange. You can have questions. You can write questions down that you have for your guide. Place yourself in a quiet space. Breathe a few times, relax the body, conjure in the mind the holographic field in which you want to ring or which you want your guide to appear. With the thought, send out the connection with the thought of your guide, ring that doorbell. Shoot, create a door with a doorbell, ring it and see who opens the door. Generate the experience within you, and then allow for the moment of exchange. Ask the questions that you want to ask and note the answer coming through your mind. If you need to, or if you like, have a recorder by you. Have it going. You can talk out loud, or if you like, just have a silent exchange within your mind, with your guide. You know, people would say, well, this is just my imagination, Jonathan. I'm just conjuring this up, by the way. You know, this is just me creating this. My guy's not really showing up. Well, I'll offer this to you. Very limited understanding of how you know yourself as a being of energy and consciousness. There is no limitation here, guys. There is nothing but fullness, nothing but wholeness, nothing but abundance in this universe. If you're feeling less than, then it is you that generates the less than experience. If you're not connecting with your guide, then it's likely you generating that lack of connection. Again, even the hands-off guides, even they interact with us. Absolutely. They make themselves known. We're not here alone. Even for those who feel lonely, you are not here alone. We are always watched over. We are always supported. And that's the beauty of the journey. So when you can, if you want to, place yourself in that kind of inner mind state. It is a vibrational state. It's a frequency pattern. You are tuning in. This is what you're doing. When you move into that holographic field in your mind and you create the sensorium of the environment you are going to be within the guide, and you would invite them to join you. In that moment, you're actually generating the frequency field in order for that connection to take place. It's almost like you have to reach out in order for them to reach back. And as long as you're reaching out, they are reaching back. Even if you think it is imagination. Oh, Jonathan, I'm just conjuring this in my mind. Fine. That's the medium of the interaction, not the reason for it, not the actuality. Mind is morphic, guys. Your guide comes to you in many forms. I've heard guides come, of course, in energetic forms, more geometric in pattern, this oblong kind of fullness of light. Most guides, of course, appear within the purple light spheres or have some sort of purple light energy, because that demonstrates the advancement of our guides. But I heard that not all guides. When I hear that all guides are purple light, I had to assess, then who do I have here as a guide? And that's when I see the distinctions of junior guides, guides in training, and role model type guides, at least the beginnings of such things. So put yourself in that place. Quiet your mind. Be in nature if you have to do it. That's awesome. You don't have to do it sitting down or lying down. Take a walk. Go to places of affinity. And if it's not outside the home, then do it within the mind. Go to that place of affinity, that place that you feel that energetic environment of connecting to a field of experience within the mind, the environment you create that generates your presence as a soul and a place to put it. and then invite your guide in. It doesn't matter how they appear. They appear as a little gnome. I don't care. Whatever your guide appears as, you can ask questions in that moment. You are plugging in. You are going through an outlet and they're coming in on the other side. You are creating a medium, and that's what your mind is. It's a medium of this consciousness of yours. And you can create the field for interaction. You don't have to do a life between lives regression. You can do this on your own. But when you do a life between lives regression, well, of course, we ask all kinds of questions around your guide. In a life between lives regression, I've had guides speak through my clients. When they do that, it's, you feel that you can hear the difference in their voice. It's a little choppier, a little less fluid, almost a little awkward. Versus when my client is speaking for their guide, when their guide is communicating through them, and then they speak what was exchanged, which is much clearer, much more fluid. But I'm amazed. I'm amazed when guides come through in sessions, and they have, and you can hear it. You can hear an alternative personality and another state of wisdom coming through, another character type with these people. It's really an awesome thing to go on. Now, are my clients knowing that their guide is transmitting through them? No, I don't even look to that. I can identify when it's happening, and then I start connecting and communicating to that guide as if they're actually there within the presence of that body, focusing through that mind, communicating, channeling really more than anything else through the client. But in that way, I'm amazed how guides connect with us. Not all guides come through in sessions. Most of them are the exchange of the client communicating to me what is being fed back. But in that moment, you can identify. You can conjure environments, conjure experience. You can take walks if you have problems. If you're seeking guidance or support, then connect. Find yourself in a moment when you are just in a daily moment of your life. And notice, is something taking place around me in the state of mind I'm in that's giving me some sort of feedback that could be considered guidance? Do I feel a feeling within my body? Do I see something around me? Do I feel a touch from somebody else? I don't know. I don't know what's going to activate my awareness that my guide is present. Will I see it? Will I smell it? Will I think it? Will I feel it? I don't know. Will it be in nature or will it be within me? I don't know. What you do know is that you can conjure it. You can create the experience. You can experiment. And as you experiment, you'll become familiar with how the experience, the exchange that you have with your guide. And as you do, again, it's one of those, 3 times the charms. So you have to knock 3 times, so to speak. And when you find that affirmation, when you find that connection, well then, know it. Know that's your connection, your way of communicating, your God way of communicating with you. Notice the context in which you can receive that. Am I getting guidance or am I getting support? Some guys just are focused on support. Some guys are just focused on guidance. And of course, everything in between. What are you receiving? And as you're receiving it, note it. And as you note it, see if it repeats itself. And as it does, note what's going on around you, within you. And as you do, you'll see throughout your life as you're in those moments, is that's what's happening. Am I being affirmed? And as you are, smile and chuckle, cool and groovy, you get a connection with your guide. So that's one way of doing it without ever having to come in for a session. It's one of these things, in the idea of religion, they have these kind of religious figures, that seem to be like these kind of intermediaries of connecting, of conduits, of interpretation of religious ideology or anything else in relation to religious philosophy. When really the recognition is that no, there's no one that acts as our medium. We are our own mediums. This is it. I am my own medium. I don't need a psychic to connect to my guide. I can connect to my guide. I don't need psychics to tell me about loved ones and what they may be going through if I have an identification, the loved ones that have passed, in other words. Also, loved ones that are present. You can also receive all this connection. Guidance isn't just from your guide as well. Guidance is written in life. Okay. We're going to go on for about 5 more minutes thereabouts. I'm going to talk about this, and I've mentioned this already. Guidance is all around you. Guidance is woven into the program, folks. guidance is an everyday 24/7 movement of a reality as life expresses itself. One way you can be guided is through identifying the neural self and its communication to you as it guides you to the fulfillment you are in. So understand the neural self is a guidance system. The feedback of thoughts and feelings is our means of communication to ourselves. So we can provide the feedback to assess choice and the radiance through which we make choice. So we are self-guiding. Your life around you is a reflection of your guidance system. If your life is not reflecting what it is you want to see around you, well, welcome to guidance. Because now you can look around you and say, okay, if I've created this, I have to be aware of what it is I'm bringing into the kind of the mind state. What is it I'm projecting into this experience that I've created this reflection around me? How can I use this moment as guidance to go to places that I desire to get to fulfill the journey I am on, the intention through which I live within as a soul in my human life? Your life around you, your environment, your friends, these are all reflections. If you have friends that are nurturing and supportive, well, you can pretty much guess that you're pretty supportive and nurturing yourself, because likely you can't get back unless you put out. It's the way it works, and the like attracts life energetic reality. Now, not all the time. Sometimes there's different intention involved, the divine intention in which we have an intention that even though we're putting ourselves out there in a beautiful and wonderful way, we're not seemingly getting the feedback, the reflection back. What's going on? Well, there's usually some sort of karmic condition woven into it, some sort of ego particle, if not ego mass, within the psyche of your being, be it in the present or from past lives, that has to be understood, that has to be worked through, resolved, healed, or enlightened through, either way, in order to get that reflection back. So if you are a good person in the world, you radiate positivity, yet you're not getting it back in your own sense, then there's other factors taking place, because this reflection is guidance system. And that's why people come to people like me, as a spiritual counselor, as a spiritual guide, so I can help you see your life, so I can help you see yourself, and the conditions that operate, and the guidance that it is giving you, so that you can make the choices to move beyond the moment you are in, to alter the reflecting field. Life is morphic, as like I said. Your body is shape-shifting. I can make Jonathan 140 pounds. I can make him 300 pounds. He's a shape-shifter. My mind is shape-shifting. It is malleable. I didn't start off in this life with these thoughts. It took a long time for my mind to shape itself to these kind of concepts, to this relationship of information that I have, the knowing that I operate through. It all comes in that recognition that everything that we do is a form of reflection, projection, reflection. That's how oneness works. And if you don't see the reflection, then you can't understand your projection. And so if you seek to more further guidance, notice the life around you, the people around you, the job that you're in. Any dissonance is guidance, guys. Don't be oppositional to it. Don't be negative with it. You're just contributing to it and bringing yourself into a place that will not allow you to receive the kind of guidance that you are requesting in the moment that you are in, be it from your spirit guide or from the field of information around you that is that feedback, that reflection, so that you can choose. Dissonance is guidance to our greater sense of self and being. Know this, and you will grow, and you will guide, and you will guide others as well. And you can also, like I say, tap into your spiritual guide along the way. Meditative energies are wonderful. It's a mind state that allows you that space, that frequency within the mind to receive. It's a very receptive state. But meditation is an alteration of consciousness. It's just changing brainwave patterns. It's just moving from one state of consciousness and frequency field within the brain to another. All it's doing is affecting the different parts of the brain and lighting up the different parts of the brain. It just so happens that this incredible medium that we operate through, this thing called the brain, is a tuner. And depending on how the frequency within it is how you can tune into the features of life that are not just obvious around you. The features of life as consciousness and energy. So see the guidance around you. Feel the guidance within you, the thoughts and feelings. Your neural self is your guidance system. The reflection of the world around you, your guidance system. And then tune into your spirit guide and enjoy the journey. And remember, 3 times the charm. 1 time for thinking, 2 times for believing, 3 times when I get those signals and all they're consistent and there's no distinction, differentiation. They are the same or similar in their moments. 3 times is my knowing when it comes to my guide. And that's how I develop this relationship. When I'm being intuitively stimulated or I'm being supported with a little pat in the back feeling. I feel that in that kind of like, not a thump, but just a kind of an assurance coming through my chest. Like when I used to feel my father pat me in the back. I would feel it into the middle of my being. So, this is our guidance show. This is all about the guides and the guidance system. I hope that you actually received what you hoped you would receive from this show tonight. I brought much more into it as we always do, but we're always bringing it in to its recognition and realizations of what we're doing here and the purpose of the journey we are on. And the one thing this show is about is helping you see your life through your spiritual eyes, to think and process and understand and integrate through your spiritual mind as a soul, so that you can journey through the life you're in a means where dissonance is not something that is oppositional but relational, and you are wiser than the dissonant moment you are in, and you are able to move through choice to generate harmony, harmonization within the journey you are on. And as you do, others are going to participate. If you want to see change in them, you have to change you. Alter your energy, and they will come along. But they will challenge you, because these are also your guides, these others. See, when you're activated by another, something I left out in this moment, you are in the midst of a moment of guidance. Their participation, their moment, their relation to you, it is there to generate that experience within you. And in that moment, you are there to be, you're supposed to be aware that, oh gosh, I was activated. Oh, whoa, what's going on here? Not because they're being idiots or anything else dissonant and conflicting you in the moment. No, they have to play their role. They have to do their moment. But they are guides nonetheless. Because when you are activated by another, then you are seeking to grow. Guidance is everywhere. Thoughts, feelings, environmental reflections, activation through relationships with selves and others. Within the environments we are in, all guidance. And spiritual guidance as well. How cool is that? That's an awesome thing. But know one thing. You cannot escape, so to speak, the karma in which you are seeking to resolve with another. And if you have dissonance, no matter what the rationale and the context and the journey of dissonance you have experienced with them, it's not about healing the relationship. It's about healing yourself. It's about growing. And as you grow, you affect the nature of the relationship in which you express or experience dissonance with. And the relationship will follow. Either we pull the good from others, good, the positive feelings, the positive energies based on our radiance, or the negative ones. And you'll know the guidance system of that moment when someone is coming at you with a negativistic way, harshly, aggressively, or passive-aggressively, and you are activated. Give them the namaste. See them as divine beings that they are on the divine journey that they are on with you in a divine moment of growth. And even though neither of you are liking the feeling of the growth, value, respect it, because there is meaning there for you. They are partners. And through partnership, truly, there's never a need to forgive. For it's all an agreed upon journey we are experiencing with one another. And as we do, forgiveness is a human trait. We don't need to forgive. We need to understand so that we can grow, so that we can be guided by ourselves, by others, and by those who work with us within the spiritual dimension, be it in our lifetimes or after our lifetimes. So, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed some of the conversation. As we continue on, the next show, I haven't quite come up with an idea for the next show. So you'll be receiving some sort of shout out in the next few days as I come to kind of think about it. I was kind of thinking counsel, things as such like that. But then again, I don't always want to include those kind of topics. There are other topics I want to include as well, topics of near-death experience and out-of-body experience, topics of evolution of belief systems, why we even got to the point of deity and theism in the first place, and what life tells us now about the knowledge we've gained and its operations and functioning, and how we can now alter perhaps the paradigm of spirituality to which we have historically adopted in the journey of our human lives. I'll be in touch about that one. Again, so you can always see the recording of this on Facebook afterwards. If not, I will certainly send out a hopefully in the next week thereabouts. I'm just my worst trait. I'm a wonderful therapist, and I'm wonderful at the work I do as a counselor. I'm a terrible administrator. As I was telling someone today here at the studio, I should have been born with an assistant, but I'm my own assistant, and I can't tell you how many times I've tried to fire myself. But gosh darn it, I need me, imperfectly as I am. So in that way, I will do my best to get these things out as quickly as I can. I do my best to return emails as quick as I can, to do all this kind of correspondence. You can always contact me at jonathanyorks.com or mysoulmyself.com, or call me at 617-875-6686. I'm happy to schedule time to speak with you. It is my absolute pleasure. All initial conversations are complimentary. There is no charge to chat. Well, this is the Past Life Regression Radio Show and Spirituality for Souls. I am Jonathan Yorks. We'll connect next week. The topic is upcoming. I look forward to it. You never know what's going to happen here on the Past Life Regression Radio Show. Until then, until our next time together, be wonderfully well.